A 4-year-old orphan suffers assault while trying to steal food at a farmer's market, but a millionaire witnesses. It and what she does is incredible. Comment and rate my story from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very important, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The small, trembling hand reached out towards the bright red apple that hung temptingly from the farmer's market stall. The 4-year-old orphan boy, looking fragile like a child of only 2 due to extreme malnutrition, could barely reach the fruit that represented his only hope of quelling the hunger that had been gnawing at his empty stomach for 2 days. His dark, sunken eyes reflected the despair of someone who knew only the cruelty of the world, as his thin fingers lightly brushed the smooth skin of the apple. The vendor's shout echoed through the stalls like a menacing thunderclap. The burly man, his face red from the heat of the sun, advanced with uncontrolled fury, his bloodshot eyes fixed on the scrawny child who had dared to touch his merchandise. The violent slap struck the boy's delicate face with disproportionate force, the sharp sound of the impact cutting through the air like a whip crack. The small body was thrown against the dusty ground of the market, his thin knees scraping on the rough asphalt as silent tears began to stream down his dirty cheeks. Hot blood welled from his injured nose, staining the torn sleeve of the faded yellow t-shirt he'd been wearing for weeks. The vendor's curse words continued to echo through the area, each insult like a stab in the child's already wounded soul. Passers-by at the market recoiled with disgust and indifference, their gazes filled with disdain directed at that pathetic figure on the ground. Some people shook their heads in disapproval, others whispered malicious comments about street urchins and little thieves, as if a child's hunger were an unforgivable crime. No one moved to help. No one showed the slightest compassion for the desperate situation unfolding before their eyes. Across the street, inside a luxury car with tinted windows, a 30-year-old woman watched the horrific scene with her heart clenching with anguish. Her blonde hair fell in perfect waves over her shoulders, covered by a designer dress that cost more than many people earned in a year. Her face, with its delicate features and flawless skin, could be featured in any fashion magazine, and her magnetic presence caused people to turn and admire her wherever she went. The millionaire had accumulated her immense fortune through smart investments in the stock market and investments in cryptocurrencies that had grown exponentially over the years. Her net worth in dollars grew steadily, fueled by stock dividends and interest from diversified investments that guaranteed an abundant cash flow. She owned assets spread across different investment funds, as well as a sizable inheritance left by her adoptive parents, who had raised her with all the love in the world. But at that moment, all her wealth and success seemed insignificant in the face of the suffering of that defenseless child. Something deep in her chest contracted with an inexplicable pain, as if a buried memory was trying to emerge from the depths of her mind. Without hesitation, she opened the car door and stepped out gracefully, her high heels clicking on the asphalt as she walked purposefully towards the boy who was still on the ground. Onlookers began to whisper to each other, recognizing her from the society pages where she frequently appeared at charity events and high society parties. Some discreetly took photos with their cell phones, surprised to see such an important person getting involved with a street kid. The millionaire completely ignored the stares and comments, focusing only on the injured child who was trying to get up on his own. She knelt on the dirty ground of the market without caring about the expensive dress that was getting stained with dust and dirt. Her delicate hands, always protected by moisturizing creams and beauty treatments, gently touched the boy's bruised face while whispering sweet words of comfort. She took a hand-embroidered silk handkerchief from her designer bag and carefully began to clean the blood that was flowing from the child's injured nose. The orphan boy recoiled in fright, his wide eyes fixed on the elegant woman approaching him. During the months he had lived on the streets of the great chaotic metropolis, after escaping the cruel orphanage where he had suffered unimaginable abuse, He had learned that all adults represented danger. His small hands trembled as he prepared to run, certain that this beautiful lady would also hurt him, as everyone else did. The millionaire's soft voice gradually calmed him down, her loving words penetrating through the barriers of fear that the child had built around his wounded heart. She stood up calmly and walked to the vendor's stall, who completely changed his demeanor when he recognized who this special customer was. She bought several fruits, fresh bread, and cookies, paying generously and leaving the man embarrassed by his previous attitude. The boy devoured the food offered with famished desperation. His tears mingling with the pieces of bread he swallowed quickly, as if he feared someone would take that meal from his hands at any moment. The millionaire watched him with a mixture of compassion and determination growing in her chest, feeling that this encounter had not been a coincidence, but rather a call from destiny that she could not ignore. For the next 3 weeks, the millionaire religiously returned to that market at the same time, always carrying bags with nutritious food, clean clothes, and small toys for the orphan boy. She had completely reorganized her schedule of business appointments and social events, canceling important meetings with investors and turning down invitations to high society dinners, all to make sure she would be present when the child appeared. The boy initially hid among the stalls, watching her from afar with suspicion, but hunger always spoke louder than fear. Gradually, he began to approach more quickly when he saw her arriving, his eyes shining with a mixture of hope and caution. The millionaire realized that he had created his own ritual. First he checked if she was alone, then he verified that there were no other adults nearby who could pose a threat, and only then did he approach with hesitant steps. Through fragmented conversations in his childlike language, interspersed with sobs and fearful pauses, the boy began to reveal pieces of his tragic story. He told about the orphanage where he had lived, a dark place run by cruel people who punished the children for any insignificant reason. He described how he was locked in dark and damp rooms when he cried, missing the parents he had never known, and how some employees shouted horrible curse words that echoed through the cold hallways during the early hours of the morning. The millionaire felt her heart breaking with each account, but something even more disturbing began to manifest in her mind. Fragments of memories that she thought she had completely forgotten began to emerge like ghosts from the past, bringing sensations of claustrophobia and despair that she could not explain. There was something too familiar in those descriptions, as if she herself had experienced similar experiences at some distant point in her childhood. The boy revealed that he had fled on a particularly cold night, when the screams of other children being punished became unbearable for his sensitive ears. He managed to climb out of a broken window on the second floor and climb down a tree whose branches scratched his delicate skin, leaving scars that were still visible on his thin arms. Since then, he had been living under a bridge near the city center, building a small makeshift shelter with cardboard and pieces of tarpaulin found in the trash. During the day, he wandered the streets in search of food, rummaging through garbage cans for salvageable leftovers and begging for alms from hurried passers-by who rarely stopped to look at him. Sometimes he managed to get a few coins, but on most occasions he received only looks of revulsion and harsh words that made him feel like an unwanted nuisance in the world. The nights were the worst, when the cold penetrated his fragile bones and nightmares about the orphanage woke him up screaming in the dark. The millionaire discovered that the boy was terrified of being found by the orphanage staff, living in a constant state of alert and always ready to run at the slightest sign of danger. He had developed a keen instinct for detecting adults who might be looking for him, hiding in narrow alleys and climbing on low roofs whenever he saw parked cars or people asking questions about a missing child. As the days passed, the connection between them strengthened in an inexplicable way. The millionaire felt that she was looking at a male version of herself as a child, although she could not fully access those buried memories. There were moments when she observed the boy's gestures and had the feeling of seeing her own reflection from the past, as if she was being confronted with ghosts of a time that her mind had chosen to forget. The turning point came when she decided that she could no longer bear to see that child suffering on the streets. One rainy afternoon, while the boy was shivering with cold under the awning of a closed store, the millionaire approached with a proposal that would change everything. She knelt down to his height and, with a voice trembling with emotion, offered him a real home in her mansion, where he would have a warm room, food always available, and never have to be afraid again. The child's reaction was devastating and completely unexpected. The boy's eyes widened with absolute terror, as if she had just threatened him with the worst thing imaginable. He began to scream desperately, saying that he didn't want to go to another place where adults could hurt him, that he preferred to die of cold in the street than to be locked in dark rooms again. His words cut the millionaire's heart like sharp razors. Before she could explain her intentions or calm him down, the boy jumped from the awning and ran out into the torrential rain, his bare feet slipping on the puddles of water as he disappeared into the narrow alleys of the poor neighborhood. The millionaire tried to run after him, but her high heels and elegant dress hindered her, and she soon lost sight of him among the crowd of pedestrians who were sheltering from the storm. She stood in the middle of the rain, completely drenched and desperate, shouting the affectionate name she had given the boy. But only the cruel silence of the indifferent city echoed back. Tears mixed with the rainwater on her face as the terrible realization that she had lost the child she considered almost like a son struck her with devastating force. That night, the millionaire couldn't sleep a wink. She walked through the empty rooms of her luxurious mansion, feeling for the first time the oppressive weight of the loneliness that surrounded her. All her material possessions, her millionaire investments, and her financial success seemed completely meaningless in the absence of that suffering child who had touched her soul so deeply. The next morning, she began a desperate search that would consume all her energies for the next few days. She hired private investigators, offered generous rewards to anyone who brought information about the boy's whereabouts, and personally searched every alley, every bridge, every place where a frightened child could hide. But the boy had simply disappeared, as if the earth had opened up and swallowed him forever. For 5 endless weeks, the millionaire transformed her life into an obsessive mission to find the missing boy. Her investors began to question her constant absence from company meetings, and her high society friends whispered about her strange behavior and her increasingly neglected appearance. She had visibly lost weight, her eyes were always red from crying so much, and her expensive clothes were replaced by simpler outfits that facilitated her forays into the poor neighborhoods of the city. The private investigation she hired began to reveal disturbing information about the orphanage from which the boy had fled. The investigator, an experienced middle-aged man with decades of experience in difficult cases, brought reports that made the millionaire's blood run cold in her veins. Several children had mysteriously disappeared from that institution over the past 10 years, always officially classified as runaways. But none of them had ever been found or returned voluntarily. The orphanage staff kept falsified records, omitting details about the abuse and creating fabricated versions about the children's behavior to justify the severe punishments. There were filed complaints from neighbors who reported screams coming from the building during the early hours of the morning, but all were systematically ignored by local authorities who received bribes to keep silent about the irregularities. The most shocking discovery came when the investigator gained access to the institution's old files through a repentant former employee who agreed to speak in exchange for protection. The orphan boy was not just another abandoned child like so many others, but had arrived at the orphanage with a small gold chain around his neck, engraved with symbols that could indicate his true family origin. The corrupt employees had sold the jewelry immediately upon his arrival, thus erasing the only clue that could connect him to his past. This revelation awakened an uncontrollable fury in the millionaire's chest, who decided to take more drastic measures in her search. She used part of her fortune to hire a larger team of investigators and began offering increasingly substantial rewards for any information leading to the boy's whereabouts. Her investment funds were partially liquidated to finance this operation, demonstrating that she was willing to sacrifice her accumulated wealth if necessary. The first real lead came when an elderly woman who sold flowers on a distant corner reported seeing a small, emaciated child rummaging through the dumpsters behind an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. The description matched the boy perfectly, including a specific scar on his left arm that he had shown the millionaire during one of their conversations. When she arrived at the location, her worst fears were confirmed. The warehouse was a dilapidated and dangerous building, with broken windows, a compromised structure, and a nauseating odor of mold and decay. Among the rubble and accumulated trash, she found small traces of a child's presence, pieces of fabric that she recognized as being from the shirt she had given the boy, food scraps that corresponded to the food she used to bring, and a child's drawing scribbled on the wall with charcoal. The drawing showed two figures holding hands under a smiling sun, clearly representing her and the boy together. This discovery made her tears flow uncontrollably, as she realized that despite all the fear and distrust, the child had also developed deep feelings for her and considered that relationship special. For 3 consecutive days, the millionaire camped near the warehouse, hidden in her car and watching any movement that might indicate the boy's return. She brought fresh food and clean water, leaving them strategically in places where he could easily find them. On the 3rd night, when torrential rain lashed the city, she finally saw him. The boy appeared like a fragile shadow among the rubble, even thinner and sicker than when he had fled. His skin was as pale as paper, his lips cracked from dehydration, and he coughed constantly, with a harsh sound that indicated serious respiratory problems. Upon seeing the food left by the millionaire, he looked around with extreme paranoia before approaching, like a wild animal checking for predators in the area. The millionaire slowly got out of the car, maintaining careful movements to avoid scaring him again. Her words were loving and patient, explaining that she didn't want to force him to do anything, that she only wanted to help him get healthy and safe. The boy watched her with eyes that mixed a desperate desire to believe her, with a profound terror of being hurt again. For 2 hours in the freezing rain, they spoke in low voices as he voraciously ate the food she had brought. The boy revealed that he had witnessed terrible things at the orphanage that he couldn't forget, scenes that made him wake up screaming every night. Some employees constantly threatened the children, saying that worse things would happen if any of them told someone outside about what they saw inside. The millionaire understood that the boy's distrust was not just childish fear, but a traumatic response based on real experiences of horror and psychological violence. She realized that regaining his trust would be a long and delicate process, requiring infinite patience and a lot of demonstration that her intentions were genuinely loving. That night, instead of insisting that he go with her, the millionaire made a surprising decision. She offered to return every day at the same time, bringing food, medicine, and dry clothes, until he felt ready to accept her help in a more definitive way. This less pressured approach visibly calmed the boy, and for the first time since the reunion, he gave a shy smile. As she prepared to leave, the boy whispered something that would completely change the course of the whole situation. He revealed that he vaguely remembered seeing a woman who looked a lot like her visiting the orphanage years ago, an elegant lady who asked questions about adopted children and seemed to be looking for someone specific. This information struck the millionaire like lightning, awakening fragmented memories that she had tried to suppress throughout her adult life. The boy's words about the woman who looked like her echoed in the millionaire's mind throughout the sleepless night that followed. For the first time in decades, fragments of repressed memories began to emerge with frightening clarity. Blurred images of dark hallways, the smell of disinfectant mixed with mold, and the terrifying feeling of being completely alone and helpless. She vaguely remembered a time before the adoption when she had also been just another child lost in the system. The next morning, she sought out her adoptive parents, a couple of successful business owners who had always been evasive about the details of how they found her. Seated in the luxurious living room of the house where she had grown up, they finally revealed the truth they had kept for 26 years. She had been adopted from that same orphanage when she was 4 years old, in traumatic conditions similar to those that the boy had described. The adoptive mother, an elegant 60-year-old woman with grey hair and tear-filled eyes, recounted how she had visited several institutions looking for a child to adopt. When she arrived at that specific orphanage, she found a small, frightened girl huddled in a corner, with evident signs of abuse and a deep fear of any adult contact. That child was herself, although her traumatic memories had been suppressed by the love and care she received later. The adoptive father, a respected businessman who had accumulated considerable wealth through investments in stocks and diversified holdings, revealed that they had tried to report the irregularities they witnessed at the orphanage at the time. However, local authorities were involved in a corruption scheme that protected the institution, and their complaints were systematically ignored. They then focused on giving their adopted daughter all the love and stability she needed to overcome the traumas of her early childhood. This revelation completely transformed the millionaire's understanding of her connection with the orphan boy. It wasn't just compassion that she felt for him, but a profound recognition of her own history reflected in that child's suffering. She realized that saving that boy was also a way to heal the unresolved wounds of her own past, creating a circle of healing that would benefit both of them. Armed with this new awareness and redoubled determination, she returned to the abandoned warehouse with a carefully drawn plan. For the next 3 weeks, she established a routine of daily visits that slowly rebuilt the boy's trust. She brought not only food and clothes, but also medicine to treat his persistent cough and vitamins to combat severe malnutrition. The process of gaining trust was gradual and delicate, like the work of a goldsmith. The millionaire never pressured, never insisted, only consistently demonstrated that her words corresponded to her action. She always arrived at the same time, kept the promises she made, and respected the limits that the boy established about physical proximity and duration of visits. At the same time, she began a complex legal process to denounce the irregularities of the orphanage and create a safe path for the boy's adoption. She used a significant portion of her fortune to hire the best lawyers specializing in children's rights, and her social influence was mobilized to pressure the authorities to investigate the complaints that had been ignored for years. The emotional breakthrough happened on a rainy afternoon when the boy finally allowed her to hug him. This simple moment represented a monumental victory, as it meant that he had begun to associate adult touch with safety instead of pain. Tears streamed down both of their faces as they hugged, two wounded souls finding healing in each other. During these weeks of rebuilding trust, the boy gradually revealed more details about the horrors he had witnessed at the orphanage. Employees who locked children in dark basements as punishment, meals intentionally scarce to keep the children too weak to rebel, and a climate of constant terror that prevented any attempt at external denunciation. The millionaire carefully documented each account, creating a detailed dossier that would be crucial to the legal process. Her assets, built through years of smart investments in diversified funds and holdings in gold and cryptocurrencies, were partially directed to fund a broader investigation that would benefit not only the boy, but all the children who were still trapped in that corrupt system. The most impactful discovery came when investigators found the gold chain that had been stolen from the boy when he arrived at the orphanage. The jewelry had been sold to a local merchant who still possessed it, and the symbols engraved on it revealed a surprising connection. The chain belonged to a family who had died in an accident, and the boy was the sole heir to a considerable inheritance that had been managed by a bank for years. This revelation completely changed the child's legal status, as he was not just an abandoned orphan, but had legitimate rights over assets that could guarantee his financial future. The millionaire realized that fate had conspired to unite them, not only because of mutual emotional need, but because they both had resources to help each other in ways that transcended simple charity. The deciding moment came when all legal obstacles were finally overcome. The orphanage was closed, and its corrupt employees were prosecuted. Other children were relocated to suitable institutions, and the boy's adoption process was officially approved. On a sunny afternoon, 6 months after the first encounter at the farmer's market, the papers were signed in a simple but deeply emotional ceremony. When they arrived at the mansion that would now be the boy's home, he surprised her by handing her a small, crumpled drawing that he had secretly kept during all those difficult weeks. The paper showed 2 smiling figures holding hands in a colorful house with a bright sun in the sky and flowers scattered around the garden. Underneath, in shaky but careful letters, he had written, "Thank you, Mommy." At that moment, the millionaire understood that all her material wealth, all her lucrative investments and profitable holdings were insignificant compared to the treasure she had found in that brave child. She had gained not only a son, but also the cure for her own emotional wounds and a greater purpose for her privileged life. The boy, now healthy and safe, ran through the gardens of the mansion with the natural energy of a 4-year-old who could finally just be that, a child. His nightmares became less and less frequent, replaced by colorful dreams about adventures in the park and playing with new friends at the private school where he was enrolled. The story ends with both finding in the family built by love a strength greater than any trauma of the past, proving that sometimes the greatest miracles come disguised as small, seemingly casual encounters, and that the true value of life is not measured in dollars or net worth, but in the ability to transform suffering into hope and loneliness into unconditional love. If you liked this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment what you thought of my story, giving a score from 0 to 10, and thank you very much.